we are live now.
Okay.
So I think let's just start then while waiting for my colleague. Thank you so much, ambassadors, Pak Bagas Apsoro, the Indonesian ambassador to Sweden and Latvia, and then also His Excellency Ibu Marina Berg, ambassador of Sweden to Indonesia and also ASEAN. Thank you so much. I hope we all are safe and healthy in this troubling time of COVID-19. And firstly, I would like to express my gratitude for you taking some time to talk with Kompas journalists about the commemorating 70 years of diplomatic relationship between Indonesia and also Sweden. I think for the last 70 years, there have been ups and downs in the bilateral relations of Indonesia and Sweden. But I firmly believe that the past decade, it's been marked by the growing cooperation in lots of sectors between the two countries, education, trade, investment, tourism, and also culture. And I believe also, based on, let's say, anecdotal evidence from my own experience and some of my colleagues, more and more Indonesians are now able to differentiate Sweden from Switzerland. And more and more, and more Swedes understand that Bali is actually Indonesia, because when I was in Sweden in 2013 until 2015, some of my friends say that they've never been to Indonesia, but they have been to Bali. So hopefully in the next few years, the understanding of both countries will be improving even more. And we have seen lots of H&M stores open in big cities in Jakarta, greater areas, and also IKEA, of course. It's not only a furniture stores, but also, let's say, it's not only where people buy tables or other household tools, but also center to know Sweden through IKEA, and also for Indonesian who have experiences in, let's say, live in Sweden and they want to visit Sweden only 1 hour away from their house, they can go to IKEA and then they can eat short bulars and also kanel bular. But I really hope that both the speakers, Ambassador Hapsoro and Ambassador Marina, will be able to provide more perspective on the current relationship between Indonesia and Sweden. I firstly would like to we will divide the discussion into let's say 2 terms. The first term will be what the ambassador talking about the perspective on the bilateral relation, and then we will open let's say 2 sessions of question and answer. Firstly, Bagas, perhaps you can provide us with some perspective, because you are currently in Sweden and Ibu Marina will be in Sweden in, let's say, in the next few hours. Well, one of the perhaps you can provide an overview of how you see the current relationship and your projections in the next few years. Pak Bagas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Pak Gal, Pak Anthony Lee. Good afternoon in Jakarta. Good morning in Stockholm. Thank you, Pak Anthony, for having me, and also good afternoon, Ambassador Marina Berry and friends. You're right that as the 2 countries get closer together, they would like to share an opportunity for this anniversary, which is 70 years anniversary of very nice bilateral and very smooth, and it's very good. I believe that there are many areas in which we we can work even more closely together. And I'm fully confident that there is a big willingness from both sides to have cooperation such as HDR, Human Development Resources, and you are part of this process also, Pak, because you are graduated from University, and information communication technology. I think there is a agreement to showcase what Swedish and Indonesia business have to offer, and we will continue to strategically work on cooperating our objective as stipulated in our ideas, our agreements, memorandum of understanding, letter of intent. However, due to the pandemic, we are still concentrating on solving the coronavirus first. But to be honest, the consultations, the meeting in technical levels are still continuing. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ibu Marina, perhaps you can also provide some kind of overviews of how do you feeling about the current relationship and how do you see the relation between Indonesia and Sweden in the next, let's say, 5 years or 10 years from now?
Yes, thank you. First of all, good afternoon from Jakarta, good morning in Sweden, and so lovely to see you all, Ambassador Bagas, Anthony Lee, and friends from KTH, and also Lund University, where actually I studied some years ago, not very long ago.
Wow.
So perspective on our bilateral relations. It's hard to describe in a few words, but let me start by saying that two countries could not be so different, but at the same time share so many similarities. First of all, we are one big country, but one small country, but we share archipelago and issues together. The ocean, maritime affairs are very close to our hearts. And also, most importantly, when we build our bilateral relation, we can do it on mutual interests. And it's mutual interest built on relations between people. We see more, I can see more and more how many similarities we have between our cultures. Despite the differences, we still have many similarities. So let me just underline that people bind countries together, and diplomacy is all about personal relations. And I think very much that our bilateral relation is built on personal relations. And I can see for the future great potentials in developing and deepening and broaden our bilateral relations based on mutual benefits. Sweden being an industrial country for many years, high-tech and innovative. Indonesia being a very curious and expanding and growing, intensively growing country with a huge amount of middle income class and young people. That has a consumer behavior that very well matches the innovative and high-tech sustainable solutions that Sweden can offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, talking about culture, it's also, yeah, I think I also encounter just some similarities. For example, we in Indonesia say gratis for free, and in Sweden, gratis is also for free, nothing for free. So, and we also have Kodak Ngorek in Indonesian traditional song, where in Sweden it's small groterna. I think it's having a similar song. I don't know, maybe both of you can elaborate more what happened, why Indonesia and Sweden, despite of having 10,000 kilometers difference, but has a similar culture. I don't know. Perhaps you, Excellencies, have any encounter with literature about that or information regarding that?
Can I take a floor, Pak Anthony?
Pak Bagas.
Yeah, Anthony, the Small Groterna song has the same lyrics as the Java song Kodok Ngorek. This song is sung when entering summer in Sweden and in Java when entering the harvest season. And the goal or spirit are the same to express, to express our gratitude for the gift of nature that blessed them. Therefore, Swedish people dance in circles under the flagpole by singing in the small Gona song is really popular here, while people in Java sing the song at night on the edge of the rice field under the full moonlight. So I don't know who bring this song and which one coming first. Smogolan first or Kodok Ngorek, but I don't want to contest this, who claimed the first one, but the spirit is the same. And even the text, you see that is really good. Semua terus tiga etsi sama kodok ngorek pinggir kali. That's the little frogs. The little frogs are funny to observe.
Yeah.
And no ears, no tails. They possess this. But this is something that they orchestrated to give expression, their gratitude for the nature. Thank you, Pak Anthony.
Thank you, Pak Bagas. Maybe Bu Marina have some thought about that?
Well, I've never had a thought about it before I read the questions you gave me before this session. But it's a lovely connection, and I think we share the love for music, the love for culture, the love for traditions. I can see very much that we care for our families and traditions in both Indonesia and Sweden in a similar way. And once again, it's very much love for people, caring for people that binds us very much together.
Thank you so much, Ibu Marina. Well, I'm going to some question that some of my colleagues already collected. Well, Sweden right now is the only country in Europe that has taken no lockdown policy. There are no talks about this everywhere, including Indonesia, and Kompas in our online platform is also in our print platform have written about that as well. And well, there is some question whether this is going to lead to herd immunity. Perhaps Ibu Marina can illuminate us in this context.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for letting me have this opportunity. I think never before Sweden has been written about so much globally at the same time about one topic. So yes, the COVID-19 pandemic is testing our society as well as many other societies around the world right now. And there has been a great interest in the Swedish approach towards combating coronavirus. Let me start by saying that the overall objective of the Swedish government is, of course, to reduce the pace of the COVID-19 virus spread, to flatten the curve. I guess you have heard that a lot right now, that we try to flatten the curve, and that is in order to decrease the number of people being infected at the same time. To ease the burden on the healthcare system and services and hospitals. So therefore, the Swedish government has presented a range of different measures to limit the spread of the COVID-19 virus and the mitigations, and also to mitigate the economic impact. We have some policies decision taken, and the aim is to limit the spread, as I said, of the infection. Also to ensure that the healthcare resources are enough and available. Thirdly, limit the impact on critical services in the society. And fourthly, alleviate the impact on people and businesses. And fifthly, ease concern, for example, by providing information, ease concern among people. And finally, the aim is to ensure that the right measures are taken at the same and right time. Of course, there are challenges. There are still a lot of challenges, and not until we read the history books, we will come closer to the answer, which strategy is the right strategy. The Swedish strategy is built on trust between the people and the government authorities. So it's all about recommendations to the people to follow the recommendations. And most people in Sweden, vast majority of the population in Sweden do follow government recommendations and authority recommendations. There is deep trust between authorities and the people.
Thank you so much, Ibu Marina. Pak Bagas, perhaps you can also provide, let's say, experiences, because you're in Sweden, you're in Stockholm, you can see that through your own eyes, the impact of COVID-19 toward, for example, the economy, and also how the citizens able to abide by the government recommendation. For example, not meeting in a group over 50 people, for example. What makes them able to abide that, for example?
Yes,
Bagas, please.
Just to highlight what Ambassador Marina just mentioned, Sweden has taken a soft approach to virus restriction, and although its rules are likely to be in place longer than other countries, there is no official statement on having herd immunity, because you asked about herd immunity. But I just would like to mention that the trust is really important between the government, and also people. Coalition or opposition, they have the same way how to tackle this issue, because this is will make other people get severe, regardless their opposition or government or the people. So every one of us will be severe about this. So I think this is very important, and part of it is. One is education, literacy. More than 99% Swedish, they get education, and they put this the board or agency for health observation in very high place, and everyone will obey what is the recommendation by this agency under the leadership of Mr. Anders Tegnell. This is the situation that perhaps other countries, including us, could also learn what is the impact of this disease and what is the impact if we continue to discuss politically and there is no solution whatsoever. But my view on this issue, Pak, I think every country has its own policy, and this is understandable. And because of the shape, the size, and the population and density of each country is different from one another. So perhaps it's good of the country like Sweden, but for other countries, we don't know. But if you see the report from the WHO and the Swedish government is strong support of this WHO, I think this might also the future model for people. So we are still waiting for the result of how to try to get vaccine and to wait for the flatten of the curve. But I think this is also one of the option part of this issue.
Can I add one thing to what I just said? I'm sorry. Yeah, and that is the trust is between every layer of the society. The government also show great trust in the authorities and the experts working within the government authorities. So the policy decisions and this decisions made by the government, taken by the government, are based on scientific research and experts' knowledge and evaluations.
Thank you, Marina. I think that's a very good point. It's led to my other question, because in one of the articles that I read, the author tried to explain different directions the Nordic countries have taken in handling COVID-19. And it comes to an interesting point, I believe. The author argues that it probably because of different administrative tradition in Sweden compared to Denmark and also to Norway. Because the author argues that in Sweden there is instrument of government, one of the book that consists of the constitution of Sweden, that say that the public agency is, let's say, having duality with, let's say, the ministry. So the technocratic and the expert is leading the way in the war against the COVID. Why it's quite different with the other country. I hope that Marina can explain more about this approach that Swedish take.
Could you rephrase the questions a little bit? I'm sorry, I didn't. It was a gap in the. Michael?
The author, I think in one of the articles that I read, the author argues that Sweden take a different direction compared to Denmark and Norway because the administrative tradition in Sweden is a little bit different. As you pointed before, it is the expert who lead the way in creating some methodology and strategy to cope with the COVID-19. And it is said that in Sweden there is this ban on ministerial rule, which makes it easier for expert in, let's say, for expert in public health agency, for example, to create strategies to combat COVID, because less intervention from politician or from even from the prime minister, for example.
Yes, of course, without doing any comparison with other countries, definitely not. We have a system in Sweden where the government authorities are independent and are controlled by the government, of course, but it is regulated in a way that it has a great maneuver within a specific framework. So I think the system and the system and the strategy that has been implemented in Sweden is, of course, working very well within the system that we have in Sweden between the government authorities, because the government authorities have an independency in relation to the government.
Okay, thank you. Despite of high trust, is there any kind of sanction for a citizen who does not abide by government regulation or voluntary, Bu Marina?
Not for the citizens. We have, of course, made some regulations for restaurants. If I take one example, restaurants cannot have tables too close to each other, for instance, and cannot contain too many guests at the same time. So if you break those regulations, you might have to close your restaurant. That's the only sort of punishment, if you can call it a punishment, that can occur. But there is no individual punishment, no. It's still recommendations.
Okay, and I also see that COVID-19 also brings Sweden and Indonesia closer, because there are some kind of assistance provided with by the Swedish government and also Swedish let's say corporations that help some local government and also Indonesian government in providing some kind of assistance in COVID. Perhaps you can elaborate this cooperation, Ibu Marina, and also Pak Bagas. Perhaps Bu Marina first and then Pak Bagas afterwards.
Yes, I would love to elaborate a little bit about that. Let me start by saying that it is very easy to be the Swedish ambassador when you have Swedish companies around you, like the companies now supporting Indonesia in this tough time. So yeah, the corona pandemic is leaving no country unscattered, of course, and every society is facing now a level of disruption, of course, and we try to stand by Indonesia in both hard times and good times.
Yeah.
So Team Sweden, that is the Swedish Embassy in Jakarta and the Trade Council here in Jakarta, we have joined forces with Swedish private sector to support efforts, to support the Swedish private companies' efforts. To that end, we are devoting great amount of resources now to mobilize and coordinate Swedish private sector to engage in Indonesia. We have started with West Java, and we have come a little bit on the pathway towards the goal, and companies like IKEA, H&M, AstraZeneca has devoted and offered great support to West Java. And there's Team Sweden, then the Embassy of Sweden and Swedish Trade Council help facilitate these efforts the best way we can. and we are thinking of developing these efforts and broaden these efforts to be not just between private sector and the government, but also include international organizations and civil society organizations into our cooperation. So we are hoping to, in the next 3 months, to further extend and develop this initiative. And we work intensively with our partners and also the Indonesian embassy in Stockholm to strengthen the support that we are given, to actually strengthen the resilience within the Indonesian communities. We hope to expand this initiative to other regions as well. We will do our utmost to actually do that. And the response, I must say, from the private sector has been tremendous since the outbreak. We all face the same enemy, whether we are the government or whether we are a Swedish company or Indonesian company or an individual. We have the same enemy. And the most important thing right now is to work together globally, between countries and regionally, and also between individuals and between private sector and public sector. And I strongly believe that this situation opens up for new forms of cooperation, where we gain from each other's strengths in order to cope and combat the common enemy we have to fight.
Okay, thank you, Ibu
Thank you.
Marina. Pak Bagas, perhaps you can also provide perspective in that issue. Please, Pak Bagas.
Thank you, Pak Anthony. Yes, I just highlight what Ambassador Marina just mentioned. I think few companies that I would like to single out are AstraZeneca, H&M, and IKEA. I'm also aware that other companies are in the process, of exploring the pilot project with Indonesian national and local authorities like the province of West Java. And let me, at this opportunity, once again, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude in Sweden, which include the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Embassy in Jakarta, and also Business Sweden, for the continuing support and cooperation throughout this crisis. And it is truly inspiring to see the cordial and close bilateral relations bring out the best in both countries in these trying times. And on this note, I would like to highlight that a handful of Indonesians that are currently embedded in the Swedish health and academic institution, contributing their expertise and knowledge, as well as the commitment for the good of the society. So if you mentioned about our bilateral cooperation, which is 70 years back, if there is a key takeaways from our 70 years of bilateral relations, which are celebrating this year, it would be the strength of our cooperation and the combination that we all have to work to helping each other. And this is a good example. Thank you.
Yes, and I thank you so much. Can I just mention, and thank you so much, Ambassador Bagas, for mentioning that there are a lot of other companies interested, Swedish companies interested in coming in joining us in this effort. And we have, of course, also small startups and small Swedish companies involved already. Just to mention 3, and that is Supertext, Brighter, and Frisk, who are small technical high-tech companies within medcare and different areas, who are very interested in supporting Indonesia for Indonesia's future. And I must say that this shows for strong solidarity between people, between companies, and between governments.
Thank you, Ibu Marina. Talking about companies operating in Indonesia and also in Sweden, I would like to ask Ibu Marina, what is the total values of Swedish investment in Indonesia, and how about the trade balance? Because this is important to see. Perhaps there will be enormous opportunities ahead of us after the COVID-19 pandemic ended.
since I was lucky enough to get the questions in advance, I was able to try to track down the numbers, but I must say, I'm sorry, I didn't really succeed. But one figure that I have is that the Swedish foreign direct investments in Indonesia 2017, and that's some time ago, mounts up to 131 million Swedish crowns. But I think you should actually maybe not be stuck with numbers on investments and foreign direct investments and export and import. What we have in Indonesia right now is more than 90 Swedish companies established already in the country. And the aim is to increase that number in order to increase the Swedish investments and Swedish import from Indonesia. And there are great efforts being done already, and it has been done already, but we have still, despite the coronavirus, we are working with different kind of initiatives in order to attract Swedish companies coming to Indonesia. I'm sorry if I don't have really the right figures and numbers for you. It's hard to track down. Maybe Ambassador Bagas is more updated.
More or less the same, same way. I would also like to check, and it is almost the same. The total value of Sweden FDI, foreign direct investment, is really great, almost 100 million US dollar, and Sweden investment in Indonesia in the last 4 years has grown significantly, almost 500%. And the statement made by President Jokowi, Pak, and he met King Carl XVI Gustav in Istana Bogor at the time. And of course, we expect to have more investment coming in from Sweden to Indonesia. But this positive trend is indicated that Indonesia is an interesting country for Sweden. For a Sweden company, many Swedish companies have invested to Indonesia, as Ambassador mentioned, is a long time ago. Pak. So, for instance, IKEA, H&M, Scania, Ericsson, and other things. Pak. And some of our household, they use Electrolux. Even the youngster, they would have Spotify, and and this is really put Indonesia also as a radar screen of Swedish businessmen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Bagas and Ibu Marina. I'm sorry because I'm late to introduce my colleague who already joining us online. And we also already have Mas Tri Agung Kristanto right now. Perhaps Mas Tri can introduce all of the personnel from Kompas that joining us in this meeting. Mas Tra, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Selamat sore, Bu Marina, Pak Bagas. Yeah, last year I met with Bu Marina, with Bu Susi Pujiastuti. We both to small island and looking for small, like in ship, and we go together. We talk and many more, I think. Yeah, Bu Marina and Pak Bagas, I'm sorry because my English is poor, so I try to introduce my colleague from Kompas Daily. We have Tommy Trinugroho, Antonius Tommy Trinugroho. Tommy Trinugroho is deputy managing editor. Also, Antony Lee is editor or in political and law section, a guest in Kompas. Also, Mas Samsul Hadi. Mas Muhammad Samsul Hadi is editor of International Desk, Kompas Daily, and Mas Mahdi Muhammad. Mas Mahdi Muhammad is senior journalist in International Desk in Kompas Daily. My name is Tri Agung Kristanto. I'm a deputy chief editor. Yeah, thank you for collaboration Kompas with Indonesian embassy and in I know Bu Marina your bahasa Indonesia as well because you more than 2 years in Jakarta, right? Yeah. So I have uh, one question. In Kompas with Sweden, we have a good cooperation. Every year, Kompas send a junior footballer to Gothenburg, I think. Yeah,
Gothenburg.
Gothenburg. Yes, yeah. Gothia Cup.
Yeah, Gothia Cup. I want to know about because we have a coronavirus pandemic. How about the Gothia Cup this year? Is still run or
I don't think so. No, I would say it's. I'm quite sure. I have no actual facts around it, but I'm quite sure it will not be arranged the way it usually is. It might be arranged in a more limited version or not as big as normally, because Gothia Cup is the world biggest football tournament for young people. And last year I was actually meeting up with 3 or 4 Indonesian teams going to Gothenburg, giving them some good luck wishes before they left. But this year I haven't heard about any team going to Sweden. Unfortunately, at this moment, we are not allowing people coming to Sweden until the 15th of July.
If I may, Pak Tra, I'm going to add a little bit. Yes, I think for this year, they postponed already. I think for the later stage, perhaps next year. But what I see about the Gothia Cup that we held in Gothenburg, I know the officials, Hans Hansen, is always helpful to facilitate the team from Indonesia, soccer team, from Kompas, and also another soccer team which received help from ESCO-F. It's a company from Sweden also. My things about this Gothia Cup is really more than football. Yeah. Because number one is talent scouting, inspired by very famous Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And number two is about how to do it professional, how to arrange and everything is, and this is dealing with the administration, arrangement, management, and I think we have to learn a lot from Gothia Cup for this one. But thank you for posing this question.
Yes, can I just add, because you are so right, Ambassador Vargas, this is binding people together, and football is culture. It's a way of bringing interests together and show solidarity, and also find a common platform for cooperating and talking and communicating, and it brings people together and you get friends forever. I have played football myself. I was a football player until I was 18 years old. Started very early, so I know exactly how it feels to meet different teams from different countries. Also, you make friends for a lifetime. So thank you for raising the
Ambassador
issue.
Marina, and also Ambassador Vargas. Perhaps I open question and answer session, but firstly I would like to give the chance to my colleague from Kompas, perhaps Mas Samsul or Mas Ato or Mas Mahdi would like to ask some question both to Ibu Marina and also to Pak Bagas. Mas Samsul perhaps, or Mas Ato or Mas Mahdi, is there any question?
Maybe I have there's a question. We are facing a pandemic, and now every country is moving to easing the social distancing and so on. And how does Swedish easing the distancing, social distancing in the tourism, because in Indonesia, like in Bali, tourism is the most every people in the every man in Bali is they their life is uh,
Mm.
hang to the tourism. Maybe Swedish can explain to us how cope the pandemic and also grow to push the
Mm.
tourism better.
Mm.
Thank you, Mrs. Marina.
Well, yes, thank you so much for a very interesting question, an important question. Uh, there are businesses suffering more than others during this pandemic, and tourism industry and are of course suffering the most, I must say, in the whole world,
In the whole world.
not just in Bali, but also in other parts of Indonesia and other countries. I don't think there is one solution to this problem, because I think in the future we will have different kind of tourism. We will have people thinking twice before they use the airplane, before they go abroad, before they actually travel. At the same time, traveling is in our backbones and DNAs already, and it should not be stopped. But I think we will. People are innovative. And I think in times like this, I hope we will find ways of traveling more sustainable, ecotourism. And I know already Bali is doing a lot in that area. Ecotourism in the way that tourism can be sustainable as well, thinking about how we travel and how much we travel. Of course, traveling to Bali from Sweden is a long distance and it's hard to do without using the airplane. But I think tourism is one thing, but then when it comes to business people, we might think twice before we travel to meetings. Having this virtual meeting now shows that it's functioning very well without meeting each other physically. But tourists needs to move. So there is no really good solutions to this problem, but there are, of course, challenges. But I think it's too early to say how to solve it, because when we open up for tourism again, it will be in a different way and with different kind of strategies.
Thank you, Ibu Marina, for the answer. Perhaps I would like to have a follow-up question of the question that Mas Tommy already asked. We usually talk about the new normal in coping with pandemic. In tourism, for example, especially in traveling, what is the new normal looks like in Sweden? For example, let's say in airplane industry, for example, what are there any kind of requirement that passenger have to have before they board the plane? For example, is there any kind of mandatory requirement that they have a COVID-19 test before or something like that?
In Sweden, there are no requirements for showing a negative COVID-19 test when you enter Sweden or when you enter a plane in Sweden. But the question you also raise is more related to how will we be travel during when we open up. Yeah. I think there will be we will take one step at a time, and the transition, there will be a transition period. You won't open up to a society which you had before the pandemic. We will take one step at a time and open up slowly and regulated. And keeping social distance is still very important when it comes to communicating, commute between countries and within countries. That goes for airplanes, that goes for trains, that goes for buses. And of course, in Sweden, the air business and also train and buses, the public transportations are suffering very much economically. But there are government support for these businesses in Sweden right now. So we are still in the middle of it. We haven't really tested the one step in a time strategy to open up, but there will be a slow opening up.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador Marina. Ambassador Bagas, perhaps you can also provide observation based on your experience in Stockholm.
My overview on this situation is, from the beginning, we observed the policy which connected in a very, very prudent way, very, very cautious way. When the leader mentioned that everyone has a distinct role, because everyone has its own part, not only but for us, this appeal is really workable. This suggestion, nobody restrict you to go to the zoo. I think Pak Ivan knows better than me on Wisconsin, are they open or not? But there is no restriction to go there. But the people understand, why should we go there at this current situation? That's number one. So cafes, bar, restaurant, they stay open, but the government urging people and business to respect social distancing guidelines. Restaurant and bars are only allowed to provide table service with table space 1 or 2 meters apart to prevent overcrowding. And I think Ambassador Marina just mentioned very right that the government was ordering to some sanction to the 5 bars and restaurants a few weeks ago because they failed to respect social distancing procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Bagas. We also have a lot of several questions here from our audience, but perhaps before going on to reading this question, I would like also to invite my colleagues, perhaps who might have other question, or maybe while waiting for my colleagues' question, I will just read the question that's given by our audiences. Let me see.
May I ask maybe one questions to Ambassador Marina?
Mas Mahdi?
Yes.
Yeah, please, Mas Mahdi.
Good afternoon, Ambassador, and good afternoon, Ambassador Bagas in Stockholm. I just we are now facing global pandemic, and then economic situation is maybe it's not so good. Maybe in 1 or 2 or maybe 5 years ahead of us. But I just want to know that this year is mark 70 years of Indonesia and Sweden relationship. And I just at 2017 or 2018, Swedish government and Indonesia government supporting each other to become a member of United Nations Security Council, if I'm not mistaken. But recently, maybe in a few weeks, we are hearing that the United States and Chinese government having a new conflict, and some analysts were saying that it will be a new Cold War. So my question is, what can the Indonesian government and Swedish government do to cope with this? That's it. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Mahdi. Bu Marina?
Yes, thank you. I love the question. Thank you so much. It's just that it's not very easy to answer in a few minutes. We could go on for one evening to discuss this. The geopolitical situation in the world is changing. Yes. We must not forget the challenges we had before the COVID-19 broke out, the pandemic. That was already a conflict between US and China, and we had the issues of climate change also on our table. We had a lot of conflicts around the world, and these challenges are still there. And unfortunately, in times like this, when you are faced with a pandemic, the people that are suffering the most normally are hit the worst during a pandemic. So that's what we have and what we are trying to tackle. In some countries already before, and all these challenges we share between Sweden and Indonesia, we have a continuous dialogue within the UN. And yes, we actually left our seat in the Security Council to Indonesia. So right now, Indonesia is playing a very important role within the Security Council, and we share a lot of common values on these issues. Not least when it comes to democracy issues around the world that were actually diminishing already before the COVID-19. So what can we do in a situation like this when we are facing the two big powers are not the powers that we are used to? The most important thing is to work together. No country alone can ease the situation. So in situation like this, we need global cooperation more than ever. The UN is more important than ever. The UN Security Council has a tremendous central role in handling this issue. And therefore, countries like Indonesia and Sweden are very important within the UN Security Council and UN in general. And also, of course, EU plays an important role in this matter and in this stage of time, as well as ASEAN. So I would say what we can do as single countries, Sweden and Indonesia, is to promote cooperation between ASEAN and EU, promote stronger cooperation within UN. That is what we can do together.
If I may,
thank you, Ambassador Marina. Ambassador Bagas, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to add a little bit, Pak Mahdi, I think not only the Swedish support for the non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, but also the support for candidacy for Indonesia on the Human Rights Council in Geneva. And I think Sweden has left a lot of great legacy for us, not only for how to solve the problem, but also the method how to solve through the negotiation, through consultation, which is very, very important, especially when we meet and discuss with the BRIC brothers. You know, we have a permanent member and we have also non-permanent member states, and they have the food rights, 5 permanent members. And I totally agree with Ambassador Marina that we are governed by multilateral, by principle of universal recognized international law and norms. And this is global cooperation, Pak Mahdi. We cannot solve by ourselves, whether we are high, we are rich or not, but cooperation is much more important than ever. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Ambassador Bagas. We still have around 9 minutes before we end the discussion. There are several questions from YouTube audience. I would like to read some of the questions. The first one is from Pak Bambang Sarjono. COVID is really damaging both countries' economy in terms of trade, economic cooperation, education, also tourism. What are the efforts that the countries have done to anticipate this thing? I think both Ibu Marina and also Pak Bagas already touched upon this issue. So I'll move to other question. I would like to ask, how about the COVID-19 case, positive case for children, especially those who are younger than 5 years in Sweden? And how do the Swedish government or the public agency in Sweden handle the situation? Perhaps we can start from Bu Marina.
The situation concerning young children under 5 years old, is that the question?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Okay. Normally, Sweden hospitals are not testing anyone unless they show symptoms. But there are, of course, exceptions. So children under 5 years old are not tested unless unless they show symptoms.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Marina. And this is all. There is also another question from Atmi Pertiwi. What is Indonesian effort to increase export to Sweden so that Indonesia is not going to, let's say, lose from Thailand or Philippines because their products are very huge in Sweden? Ambassador Bagas, please.
Yes, our main product is really great for export, no? Especially the coffee, because in Sweden they are really a coffee drinker, especially when they have a fika.
Fika, yes.
Yeah, fika. You know fika, when you are in Lund,
Yes.
So this is a big potential, Of course, it must go through the process, especially with the EU regulations and the issue of animal welfare, the issue of animal cruelty. We know exactly. But one thing that we can learn from Sweden and other Scandinavian countries here is their respect for geographical indication, their respect for the local wisdom as well. So their request cannot be copied with other fake products, like a coffee Malabar from Bandung, and coffee Kintamani from Bali. Gayo is very, very important here. So, and other than that, also textile and clothing. We have some prospect. We see that in IKEA and other store here. We have some products from Indonesia, and this is very promising.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador Bagas. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce the chairman of the PPI Swedia, Mas Ivan. I'm terribly sorry. I was a little bit nervous at the beginning because I haven't been using English for quite some time. So before we go into the closing statement from both Ambassador Marina and also Ambassador Bagas, I would like to ask you a question. Perhaps you can add on some observation because I believe you live in Stockholm because you are studying at the KTH.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. What is your observation, especially when you see how, because since the strategy that Swedish government imposed in coping with COVID, it's really stressing on, let's say, self-limiting. So they have to be independent in deciding whether they go outside or not. So it's really based on the person. What is your opinion about this? How do you see this thing going on in Sweden? How is your reflection compared to Indonesia, for example, when you read some news or you watch the news from streaming, for example?
Okay, thank you for the question, Mas Anthony. Actually, I couldn't agree more with the explanation that Ambassador Marina has given us previously. That basically the situation here is just based on trust between two parties, between the government and the citizen, and then the other way around. And I also, from my point of view, because of the literacy rate of the Swedish people, that is very high, 99%. So they are very intellectual and they know exactly what they are supposed to do and what they are not supposed to do. So that is why the situation here in Sweden is like not like the other countries where the citizen don't really follow the rules. Here the citizen is mostly follow the rules from the government, and I like very much the approach of the Swedish government that they don't ask the citizen or ask the students to just stay at home, but that doesn't mean that we don't hold any responsibility. We do, but then we also have to know what we are supposed to do and what we are not supposed to do. I like it very much, the Swedish approach.
Okay, thank you, Mas Ivan. Do you think that Indonesia can implement this kind of strategy?
It's a tough question because comparing the number of the citizens of Indonesia and Sweden is like earth and sky. Like 1 million people for the whole country in Sweden.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 million people for the whole country in Sweden. 10 million
it's like in Jakarta.
only in Jakarta. And I think it's not going to be easy to adopt this approach to Indonesia.
Yeah.
But I just wish that the government will do something more about this situation.
Okay, thank you, Mas Ivan, for your valuable
You're
input.
welcome.
The ending of our discussion, and I have one question for each Ibu Marina and also Pak Bagas, also as a concluding remark from both ambassadors. I would like to start to Pak Bagas. Pak Bagas will soon complete his assignment in Sweden. What are your impression of Sweden so far, Pak Bagas? Because you've been there like 4 years, or 4 years, I suppose.
Thank you very much, Pak. If I may, Pak Taufik, you would like to show the, give me 2 minutes or 3 minutes.
Okay.
The first time I recognized Sweden, way back on 1972, when I was junior high school student in Banjarmasin, Pak. And my biology teacher, Mr. Ansel, told me that day, it was 1972, and he told me that there was a big conference in Sweden, and the name is the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment held in Stockholm. I didn't know at the time, but it was a great and really big. In 1992, in Brazil also, UN Conference on Environment. And now, 48 years later, Sweden has Greta Thunberg. Caring about environment is inherited by most Swedish generation. And next, this is also, when we mention about this very famous heroes, I would say, Sweden is a peace-loving country. When you hear about the name of Folke Bernadotte, Dag Hammarskjöld, Olof Palme, Anna Lindh, they are heroes on peace and security. Next one. And this is also very much in tune in my not only me, but also my whole family. Sweden is pretty sparsely populated country, and as such, has huge extension of territory with only nature. So if you love spending time outdoors, you will find very easy to take a kayak, go paddling through the archipelago, and they have also the so-called the law. The name is Allemansstraten, which allow you to roam freely wherever you feel like in the nature, as well as making fires, camping, and picking up the berries. Next one. And this is Fikava. I don't want to tell much about this one because this is the culture that so coffee drinking and numerous attempts have been made to describe it. And Swedes, they drink at least 3 cups a day and has one of the largest coffee consumption per capita in the world. So this is a good opportunity for Indonesia. And I think I don't want to go much on this issue, but this is a part of a culture, the way you communicate with each other through the discussion, informal gathering, through Fikava. Next one. This is also important, Pak. I think I haven't paid anything cash for at least 4 years, Pak, no, in Sweden, Pak. All the places, even the buses, Pak, accept plastic cards. And technology has reached almost all sectors. In Stockholm, has the second highest density of technology companies just after Silicon Valley, Pak. Lagi, Pak. Next. This one is very, very important also. It related to all the high-tech, fintech, and other things. So this would be considered something totally out of the ordinary in most countries. But in Sweden, it is normal. Sweden is also commonly used as a test market to launch new products due to the population's high propensity to try out and test new stuff. So no wonder that Skype, Spotify, and so many others are started here, from Sweden. And next, this is the last slide, Pak. I think Lapland or Lycksele is my favorite place in the world, Pak. I was talking about Lapland, but I love it so much, Pak. I love it so much, so I will be missed. And if you go here, try to go there one day, and you might feel the same way like me also, Pak. So this is my, and this is my last, last part. I'm going to say something on this one. There are some lessons I learned from the government of Sweden, the people, and I hope our bilateral dialogues in the future can incorporate it for potential cooperation. And let me take this opportunity through you, Pak, my deep appreciation and sincere thanks for both official support cooperation that Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Sweden and everyone in Sweden who has kindly helping in my mission during my 4 years. I want to correct you, but it's not 4 years, but 4 years plus 4 months tenure in
4
Sweden.
years, 4 months, okay. And will be forever, Pak, because you will never get out of Swedish memories when you get back to Indonesia.
Thank you, Pak. Taksamika, Pak.
Thank you,
Makasih.
Ambassador Bagas, for very thoughtful remarks. And for Ibu Marina, you've been in Indonesia for 1.5 years, if I'm not making any mistaken. And how is your impression so far about Indonesia, beside of traffic jam, of course, in Jakarta?
You know, let me start by that issue. Traffic jam is not that bad as everybody says. So I was sort of, everyone told me that was going to be the worst part when I moved to Jakarta. But so far, I have not found it troublesome. And I cross my fingers it will become even better now, since we have realized how nice it is with less traffic during the partial lockdown and social distancing restrictions we have in Jakarta. But let me say a few words about Indonesia. Yes, 1.5 years, and also soon 2 years actually. And I've just said yes to extend my term here with 1 year. So when I have been here for 4 years, I will definitely show you some good slides from Indonesia. But first of all, it's a fantastic, enormous country with a wonderful nature and countryside. And I long to explore it even further. And for me, Bali is, of course, a special place also. But I must say, just wait until tourism and people find other places in this country. And what Indonesia can offer in its diversity, in its different nature and countryside is exceptional. So at the same time, being an archipelago with so many thousands islands and people all over the place, it is a difficult country to govern. And I admire the Indonesian government to take care of the country in such a solid and resolute way, coordinating the different regions. It's enormously impressive to watch and to follow. And also, at the same time, having such a big country, it is impressive that to take care of. It's impressive that Indonesia also is a very important global actor and plays such an important role, not least within the UN, when it comes to women, peace and security, which we share a lot of common interest in this area, and also in democracy issues. Indonesia being one of the world's biggest democracies, it plays a significant role also when it comes to developing basic values on democracy and human rights. So a country with great potential that we need on the international platform, but that Sweden also needs in its bilateral relations very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Marina. I'm not going to make any conclusion out of the discussion, but judging on based on very optimistic view from both ambassador, I'm sure that the relationship between Indonesia and Sweden for the next 70 years will be flourishing. But before I close the discussion, I would like to over the floor to Mas Agung Kristanto to give some remarks. Mas Agung.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Bu Marina, I think no traffic jam in Jakarta. We just park our car in the street, not traffic jam. Yeah. Thank you for collaboration, Pak Bagas, and thank you, Bu Marina. I going to Sweden, I think 3 or 4 times, and and I like a small place in Stockholm. I know the name is Epicentrum. So yeah, I hope sometime I will with Kompas go to Epicentrum and learn about technology and digital for the future, because Epicentrum is very powerful. I know from in Sweden. And Bu Marina, I have one not question. I hope Bu Marina able to help us, because we know in Sweden you have the oldest newspaper in Europe is in Sweden, uh, still appear today. Aftonbladet, yeah, Aftonbladet. You have a powerful newspaper in Sweden. Except Aftonbladet, you have Dagen Nyheter and Svenska Dagbladet. Uh, I have a dream sometimes Kompas and another newspaper in Sweden. We have a collaboration, and I hope you able to facilitate me to collaboration with your newspaper in your media in Sweden. Thank you, Bu Marina. Thank you, Pak Bagas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, for this meeting. Anthony.
Thank you very much. Tak Somika. Terima kasih Pak. Terima kasih banyak Pak.
Thank you very much,
Terima
Mr.
kasih.
Marina and Pak
Bu
Bagas.
Marina.
Terima kasih Pak
Thank
Sam.
you.
Terima kasih juga
Thank
Pak
you very
Mahdi.
much.
Teman-teman
Thank you.
semuanya. Pak Ivan
Thank
juga.
you very
Sukses,
much.
Nat.
Thank you.
Terima kasih teman-teman. Pak
Yes,
Tommy
thank
juga
you.
makasih ya Pak
Bye.
Tommy.
Iya.
Sama-sama, Pak.
Terima kasih
Yo.
banyak. Budi.